you don't need to be a beginner to feel stuck, and sometimes the more you create, the more burnt out you actually feel. I'm Adam from Dirty Roots Berlin, and this is the second week of the Artist's Way review. Little context in case you don't know, I'm Adam. I have been growing indoor plants for over 25 years and running a creative business that focuses on plants as an artistic medium for the last 7. And I've currently been doing the Artist's Way. This is the second week. So we're gonna do the review together. It'll help keep me a little bit more honest. And I think will give you guys a little bit more insight into the ideas and concepts that go into creating each design. So this week was all about reclaiming your space and taking back time for yourself. We looked at the sort of the biggest time activities that we do each week, and there were a few. I actually should probably grab my notebook so I remember what they were. I definitely don't lack time to do fun creative projects. So that was probably about the third biggest thing that I did this week, and that's fantastic. I also took care of a lot of plants, and I spent some good time relaxing. So I think all in all, it was definitely, I'm looking at the things that I spend the most of my time on, and maybe they're not all stuff I would like, but it's not a bad balance of things. So yeah, I was surprised. I thought it would be way more imbalanced. There's definitely some room for improvement, but I think that it definitely gave me more of a calmer focus on where I am spending my time and realizing it's not as bad as maybe I sometimes make it feel like in my own head. I sometimes give myself a lot of grief for not working hard enough, but the truth is I spent a lot of time working and I got a lot of significant things done. So that's really good. And I spent a lot of time creating, and I also spent time exercising and relaxing and taking care of myself. Were they all balanced to what they should be? No, but I did do a little bit of everything that needed to be done. So that is great. Why am I doing this weekly review? Because I recently did the Artist's Way and I found it very helpful, but I didn't probably do it as thoroughly as I would have liked to. And I think doing it a second time and here on camera will keep me a little bit more honest, help me do a lot more of the tasks, and perhaps put a bit more sincerity into it. And I will say, having gone 2 weeks, this has definitely been the case. So putting this out there has really made a big difference for me. So I hope you guys are following along and enjoying. So yes, the other nice thing about doing this weekly review, particularly here on camera, is it allows me to have a much easier look back on any mind shift things that have happened or any attitude shifts from the beginning to the end of this course. Where when I was just doing it on paper and writing things down, it's maybe a little bit more difficult for me to get into the sense of what I was writing. So I'm also doing this weekly review on camera because it helps me recognize any mindset shifts that occur during the time of doing this course. And I think it's a lot easier for me to see it when I watch it back on camera than if I'm just, reading my morning pages back, which you're not supposed to do for the first number of weeks anyway. So yeah, for me, I find it's been very helpful. So I'm really been excited. This is week 2. Last time around, week 2 was the most difficult week for me. And I would say this time around, week 2 was definitely easier than week 1. And I feel a momentum building. There were a lot of really fun things that took place this week. So not saying that there didn't have its challenges. It certainly was challenging in a lot of ways. But I do find this was a much easier time doing week 2 than it was the first time. So I am definitely excited to see this hopefully continue. I know that there will be challenges. I don't want to say like, oh, hey, since week 2 was so easy, everything will be fine until the end. But I do enjoy the fact that there has been some very positive momentum even from the start, and it has continued. So this is really, really great. And I think that by sharing the process, it'll help motivate you and maybe get you excited if you're going through this as well, so that maybe you don't feel so alone and you get a better insight into how other people are going through this process. So the core tasks that you're supposed to do every day are morning pages, and I did my morning pages every day, and I did all 3 pages. Last week I did 6 days to completion and 1 day where I just wrote like 3 lines. So this week is an improvement. I think that as far as I'm aware, this might be the first time I've done all 3 pages every day for all 7 days. So that also felt really good. There were definitely some days where I felt like quitting, but I forced myself to get through, finish the 3 pages even today. I've noticed that when I'm somewhere around, like 1/3 of the way through the last page, I'm just like, I'm so done. I'm ready to move on and start doing my day. But I've really been forcing myself to finish it, and things have been coming out in that last little bit that I didn't expect. Sort of once I push through that uncomfortable boredom, I'm starting to get to some cool insights. And then, of course, the other task that happens every week is what's called the artist date. And that's where you take your artist out on a date. You don't actually have to go out and do anything. And in fact, this week I stayed at home and I spent some time sort of learning blues slide guitar. I've had a guitar for quite a while and I've had a slide for, a number of years, and I never really put any energy into it despite really wanting to. So this week I spent some time really just sitting down and playing and watching a video sort of to kind of get back into the basics. It had been many years since I've tried, so this was fun. I will admit I did not do the artist date as long as I probably should have. I did cut it short. I think I probably only played for about 30 minutes, and that was not significant enough. Now, there's no excuse for that, and I just recognize that just means I am gonna have to be more protective of my time in particular ways. I think one of the other things that I did is there are tasks every week that are specific to that week, and I didn't even get to listening to the tasks and figuring out what they were until the very last day, so yesterday, and sort of finished them all in the middle of the day yesterday. And I recognized that there were a few things in there that would have been beneficial had I been doing them throughout the week, that would have helped me reclaim that time a little bit better. So that's another lesson that I really learned, is that it makes sense to at least read through and understand what tasks are ahead for that week, even if I'm not going to get around to doing them once I've read the chapter. So, for example, after I do this weekly review here on camera, I will then go and read next week's chapter so that I'm set up for tomorrow. And this week, I'll actually make sure that I listen to and reread through the tasks so that I'm very clear at least on what I have to do, even if I don't sit down to do any of those tasks until, say, tomorrow. So, that being said, let's get into what the special tasks were for this week and talk about those. So there were affirmations and readings. This is one of the things that would have been beneficial had I read the tasks ahead of time, because apparently you're supposed to start working with affirmations at the end of your morning pages, and she recommended doing maybe 3 affirmations 5 times. She has a list of specific affirmations, and continuing to work with what she calls our blurts. So when you write down an affirmation, such as I'm a brilliant and prolific artist, and your mind says, no, you're not, you're a terrible, lazy bum, that you're supposed to write that down and then convert that into a new affirmation of like, no, I'm super productive and I get lots of stuff done and I'm not a bum at all, whatever. I haven't found that I've gotten a lot of blurts recently. I didn't do much of the affirmations. I did them yesterday, and I did them this morning as well, and I'll continue doing them particularly for a while. I don't know, again, what the next week's tasks are, but I will keep doing the affirmations after my morning pages. I will continue to do the affirmations after the morning pages. I have found them very beneficial, even though I've only really done them for the last 2 days. I didn't really get any blurts, to be honest. I've maybe been fairly positive on myself, surprisingly, and at least I was trying to choose affirmations that felt uncomfortable, but very quickly after I wrote them, like twice, I didn't get any blurts, and I felt very like, okay, this is like, I can take this on and I can open up to this a little bit. So that was pretty shocking, actually. I found that this time, spending a little bit of time actually doing the affirmations really helped me to feel a lot smoother, even when there was some maybe like turbulent things going on in my life. I was able to calm myself a lot quicker and not get so upset, which was really beautiful. And then the other part of that is there's the basic principles. So she has, I think 10, I don't remember, but 10 basic principles, and you're supposed to read those every morning and every evening. I have not read them twice a day, every day, but I have read them probably once a day, every day. and maybe forgot one day, and I probably read them twice in one day as well, but that's about it. I would like to get better at that. I have read them today. I will read them again a little bit later. So I'm getting better at now. This is maybe the second time I've read them twice in a day, or will. I'll keep doing that more and more as well. So that was the basic principles and affirmations. Actually, I mean, they're a bit cheesy and hokey, if I'm being honest. It's not really totally my style, but I have found that they are more calming emotionally than I expected them to be. So I'm gonna keep doing them, despite the fact that there's a part of me that's like, this is just dumb. It's still, I still have found it to be a benefit. So I will keep doing them regardless, at least for the time being. So the second task was to figure out where your time went. And because again, I didn't read the tasks until sort of the end of the second to last day, I didn't really pay attention throughout the week, but I looked back and figured out more or less where most of my time had been going. Work was a really big one. Grocery shopping, spent a lot of time doing that. There was also some relaxing in there, exercise, and so there was a decent balance of things as far as what the activities were. You're supposed to check to see if there were any places where you need to make more boundaries, and I definitely noticed I didn't have the best balance, so there is going to be some areas where I need to kind of reclaim some of my space and my time. But in general, I was really quite pleased with how I had been spending my time for the most part. It maybe wasn't the right allocation of hours, but it was definitely more productive than I perhaps would have given myself credit for. And I spent more time relaxing and recuperating and taking care of myself more than perhaps I give myself credit for. So that was kind of nice to see that I'm actually probably harder on myself than I really need to be. So that allowed me to relax a little bit as well. So that was very, very nice. The next task is to create what is like called a creative safety map. So you draw a circle and you write inside of the circle all of the things that you really like doing or want to do, all of the people that are really supportive of you doing that, and then outside of the circle, all of the people that currently are not being very helpful towards your sort of creative expression and things that are taking time away from, you know, perhaps the things that you want to do, these should be doings. And so I did that. I wasn't particularly surprised by what I came up with. One of the questions they ask is like, did you notice yourself censoring yourself around certain people and maybe therefore you need to protect yourself or not share what you're doing with them as much? I didn't really find that to be the case, which was great. When it came to my ideas, I just shared them. Maybe they weren't well received, but so what? It didn't bother me too much. So that felt pretty good as well. And there wasn't a whole lot of work to do in that regard. There wasn't a bunch of people that I was like, need to keep out of my creative space. I'm inviting you all in. So I think that feeling a lot more comfortable, and I've definitely been experimenting a lot more. So that was, again, a really nice thing to look at. So despite the fact that I don't always feel creatively safe, I actually probably am, and that more of this is self-inflicted than anything else. Okay, so the next thing is to list 20 things you enjoy doing, and I went through this list. It was a pretty great list. It took me a little while to get to all 20. I probably stopped at around 15, and took a little while to get the last 5. Once I kind of had it all in there, I took a good look. Most of them I do on a very regular basis, which is great, or are gonna do soon, or did not that long ago. There were a couple on there that I hadn't done in a while that I would be nice to get back to. Going to the spa actually is very nice. It's just like a sauna and relaxing. So that will be fun. I haven't done that in over a year. Maybe I'll do that coming up soon. But for the most part, most of the things that I enjoy doing, I do pretty regularly. So again, going through these tasks helps me to realize maybe not so much where I'm lacking, but rather that I'm not lacking as much as my mind likes to tell me that I am. And that there isn't really a whole lot of readjustment that needs to be done in my life, but rather perhaps I just need to readjust my particular focus on how I'm feeling about what's going on. Just because I perhaps maybe don't feel the greatest about it doesn't mean that I'm not doing the things that I want to be doing, that it really is just an attitude shift and a focus shift that'll really make a bigger difference than anything else. Then the next thing is, with this list of 20, you're supposed to pick 2 of them that you're gonna then actually do this week. I realized in all of these 20 things that I want. So the next thing they talked about was revisiting these affirmations. Of course, I didn't do them until starting yesterday and today, and I haven't gone through that many of them. I chose the ones that seemed the cheesiest to me, because I figure like if they seem really cheesy, then I'm probably resistant to them to some degree. So I chose the 4 or so that were the cheesiest, and it's been fine. It hasn't been particularly difficult. In fact, it's been quite calming and relaxing, so that's been really lovely. So I'm gonna keep working with the affirmations, and I'll maybe revisit this question to see how they've affected me and see if they have an even bigger effect doing them more than just 2 days. Last week, we were asked to write down 5 imaginary lives. In other words, if we just did life over again, what are 5 different things that we would do? And then pick one and maybe start finding a way to incorporate some aspect of that into our life. This week, we were asked to do that again, and in going through my notes, I realized I must have gotten distracted halfway through, and I only wrote down 2 new lives. So I have a list of 7, not 10. So I'm gonna have to go back and fix that up. I didn't finish that exercise. I thought I did, but classic me getting distracted. So the next task was to do what's called a life pie exercise, where you draw a circle like this with 6 pie slices, and then in each one, you write spirituality, play, work, friends, romance, exercise, and you decide how satisfied you are in each area. And then you put a dot in that pie slice depending on where your satisfaction level is. So if you're super satisfied, it's gonna be right there on the outside of the pie. And if you're not so satisfied, it'll be much closer to the center. As you can see from mine, there's some imbalance in there for sure. But I was really pleased that when I was going through this, that there was nothing where I felt was completely lacking. I mean, I do exercise fairly regularly. I have decent friends. I have romance and adventure. I work quite a lot, and I'm particularly satisfied with my own sense of spirituality. So I was really happy where most of the things were at least, the least thing was a 4, I would say, out of 10. So there are definitely some room for improvement, definitely some places in my life where I'm gonna need to spend some more time and attention. But I don't think I was so out of whack as to be bothered and say, oh man, this really is bad and I need more of that. I think everything ended up being, again, a lot more calm and relaxed than perhaps I like to give myself credit for. I'm probably a lot harder on myself than I really need to be. And then when I go back and do a little bit of reflection, it's not really nearly as bad as maybe I feel in the moment. In fact, it's quite good. So the last exercise or last task for this week was called 10 Tiny Changes. And you choose 10 things, actually tiny and or not so tiny, and you write down in the form of, I would like to. And so I wrote down a bunch, including things like get a new pen, get a new notebook, because my notebook here is just a couple pages left, and a few of these last pages are actually drawn on anyway. So I maybe have 2 more days worth of this. I went through 3 pens this morning that are now all out of ink and have no ballpoint pens in the house that at least function in a way that I would like. So I will probably go get myself a pen. But there were a lot of other bigger things as well as smaller things on there as well. There's a nice fun list, and you choose 2 of them to go do. So I am gonna go get myself a pen and a notebook later on today so that I have plenty of places for my morning pages and my tasks, and I have a nice utensil to write with. I probably emotionally was a bit of a roller coaster. However, I think when I went back and reflected on the week, it was much better than I maybe felt at the time. And so being able to go back and reflect helps me to not get so stuck up in how I feel about something, but I can look a little bit better and recognize the progress that is actually taking place. I would say there were a couple of times this week that felt very creatively honest. I came up with some fun ideas of ways to experiment with new designs for the sphere planters for current collection as well as possible future collections. And there were some really exciting ideas that happened perhaps by accident, but I'm starting to recognize can be utilized in a lot of ways. There's the first time I went back to experimenting with really how to make the sphere planters in a way that I haven't done in a long time. So that was really fantastic. There were some challenges though. I do think that there's definitely a bit of frustration. I'm still not fully relaxed and open in how I want to express myself. I'm still, I think, struggling a bit to really put everything together in a way that I feel reflects what I'm trying to communicate. I will say there's a lot of talk in the book about synchronicity, and one really cool thing was I just started getting back into sort of climbing. I was watching the TV show Floor is Lava and having fun with how zany and silly that was. And I was walking around, and there's a park, the closest park to me, it's probably less than 5-minute walk from my house. It has some monkey bars and things like that. And I was over there. I had never really gone over, and I noticed that there's this giant rock climbing wall there. And it's got a whole variety of different levels in one sense that you can climb on. You can make it way more difficult for yourself, which is really fun. So I realized I actually have like a free climbing gym less than 5 minutes from my house. So in one sense, that was really cool. I was getting into it and then noticed that it was there. I've been living here for a few years and I hadn't really recognized it because normally throughout the day, it's more like a family park. You're not allowed to have dogs. There's no big reason for me to go by. I just happen to walk by it occasionally. And finally, he was like, well, I'll do some pull-ups here. And then when I was there doing some pull-ups, I stopped to actually look at the park itself and what was going on and realized, oh my gosh, exactly the kind of gym that I was looking for is less than 5 minutes away and totally free. So that was really cool. I mean, it still existed the whole time, but I didn't recognize it until right when I was getting into wanting to sort of try that back again and get back more into climbing. I climbed a little bit, but not much. So this is definitely really, really exciting. And because there's sort of this newfound excitement, there's also, I feel, reinvigorated in a lot of the business side of things, that a lot of the things that were perhaps seemed like bigger challenges or maybe seeming not so big, and things that I can actually probably handle a lot better. So I'm definitely excited about that. There's definitely a lot more momentum that seems to be building. Where it'll go, I'm not entirely sure. So it's a bit exciting, a bit scary, but maybe in a good way. And yeah, I mean, it's only week 2. There's definitely a lot to go. So if you are enjoying this, please remember to subscribe or follow along. I do want to say thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. And I highly recommend, if you haven't yet, go get the copy of The Artist's Way for yourself, start it, and follow along and do the journey with us, and check up in the weekly reviews. We can do them together, leave some comments, and I think it'll be a good time. So until then, I will see you next week.